Heyo, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about what I learned. I know I mentioned in a video that I had been going through a really hard season and that I wasn't really sure if it was like depression or like what exactly to call it, but that it was like November to February. That would be the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. And I just wanted to share a little bit more about what I meant by that and what I learned through that. Honestly, like in that season, even recognizing that it was really hard, it was very difficult to admit how hard it really was on me and how much that really was affecting me and how hard I was really fighting every single day to find joy. And I never ever would have thought in those times that I would look back on that as one of the most important seasons of my life, but I do. And it's really funny because like you know that God works all of the hard things together for good, and you know, so there's something really big and horrible and awful going on, like your child dies, you know in your head that God is working it together for good and that it's gonna be okay, and like he's probably gonna grow some really good stuff in you from having to go through that difficult hard time. But in this season, I honestly didn't feel like I had a right to be going through a hard time. Like everything on the outside of my life was going pretty great, and it was literally just inside that I was battling this every single day. And so to kind of try to explain, it was mostly just like feeling so empty all day, and like the best word I can think of to describe it is like restlessness and claustrophobia. Every day would just feel so empty and so lifeless, and whatever I was doing, eventually I would just start feeling so trapped of like, what am I even working on? Like, what does this matter? What is the meaning in this? What am I living my life for? And I would just start feeling so restless, so distant from God, so empty and so meaningless, and not feeling like there was any hope to feel any differently. There were so many different things I learned through that. I learned power of prayer and how to battle that with prayer, and now I'm really good at regulating my emotions with prayer. I learned this conviction that God does care about our feelings, and like, I don't even want to say this without explaining it more. Maybe I'll do another video later so I can prove that I'm not a heretic, but that he wants us to feel good things, not necessarily feel happy, but yes, kind of feel happy, feel at peace, feel joy, feel at rest. He cares about my emotions, and he wants my emotions to be in line with his heart and in line with reality. Probably we'll talk about that another time. And then the third thing that I learned was what I really want to focus on right now, the truth that God is with us and he will never leave us or forsake us, and that his heart is for intimacy and that he wants to be close to us. I don't really know where I got this impression. I think it was just from a lot of Christianese and like churchy phrases that I heard growing up about like being in the desert, and it's like praising God on the valleys and in the mountaintops, streams of water in the desert, and like God's mercy and provision to you in these dark, hard seasons when God feels silent or distant. Everyone trying to give you the correct expectations about being a Christian of like, it doesn't mean you're automatically happy all the time. Bad things are still gonna happen to you. All of that is true. It makes sense, but somehow the impression that I got was sort of this sense of helplessness. I somehow had this impression that you go through dry seasons and good seasons, and you're gonna go through deserts, and you're gonna go through lush oases, and you're gonna go through the valleys, and then you go up on the mountaintop, and then down in the valley, and then up on the mountaintop. And it's like kind of these helpless waves just rolling over you all of your life, and there's nothing you can do to change about your circumstances. Sometimes you're gonna feel great and on top of the world and have a spiritual high because you went to church camp, and sometimes you're gonna feel horrible because the reality of life just hits you in the face. Sometimes God's gonna be so easy to access because you're still like coasting along that spiritual high. Sometimes he's gonna feel so far away, and it's like, well, I guess you just kind of sit there and wait for that to be over and him to reach out to you again. I just kind of had this sense that somehow the all-knowing God up in the sky, it was his plan for me to be happy sometimes and it to be hard and depressing other times. Yes, he would be with me all the time, but like you don't get to feel that all the time, and there are going to be seasons that you go through where you feel so far from God and it's like there's going to be no hope whatsoever, but somehow he's going to grow something good in you through it, and they'll be okay in the end, and then there'll be a good season, and then you're going to be back in that hard place, okay? And that was terrifying to me. So for a couple months before that, was just like kind of the best time of my life. I was doing great. I was like really learning what it meant to fall in love with God, and it just made my relationship with him so much more intimate, so much more personal, so much life, so much beauty there. And I was like, I don't want this to end. And I started feeling scared and just worrying so much about when that was going to be over, when it was going to be an arbitrary season of feeling the silence of God and feeling rejected and abandoned by him, that it was really hard to enjoy the season that I was in right then. And I was starting to get so terrified of God leaving me, because I was like, this is literally the one thing that gives my life purpose. This is my only hope. And if God abandons me, I have no hope. And literally, what's the point of that? And I was almost like feeling like he's cruel. Like you know that God knows everything, and so if that's the way he does it, there must be a good reason for it. But I was just like like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't want to just be helpless my whole life of like, God can make me feel happy at him and God can make me feel far from him. I don't really have much of a choice or much of a say. It's just, he's like, all right, you were happy for a while, but now we're gonna like withdraw for a while and not talk to you for a little bit just so you don't like get too content and satisfied here on earth. You recognize that there's hard troubles and like during that dark time I'm gonna like actually do some stuff in you and then like you can feel close to me again for a while, but then I'm gonna push away again. And it really didn't fit with what I was learning of God's heart. And so through this season where I would feel so far from God and I was in this constant battle from my emotions every single day when it didn't make sense. On the outside it was like things were pretty great, but on the inside I was like, this is one of these arbitrary seasons where God was just like, all right, no more of me for a while and I don't know what I did or when he's gonna come back, and you just kind of wait it out, I guess. I've said this before, I do a thing where I journal every morning what I feel like God said to me the day before. And so I identify this season as like the hardest season of my life, and I just felt so far from God and so meaningless and just lifeless and listless and just But reading back in my journals, there was God's faithfulness to me every single day. Like there was something that he said, something that I felt like he was stirring in my heart. And I really do feel like he met me every single day and was gracious to me and helped me to get my emotions in line again. Now, I would have to pray so hard and like stop what I was doing and be really intentional about it, like 2 or 3 times a day maybe. But every time I did that, he was faithful to respond and I felt him near me again. Even if half an hour later I was like, God, where did you go? This is horrible. I feel dead inside again. There were a couple times where it was like a couple days in a row where I didn't really feel like he was responding to me and I was doing everything I could to pursue him. Even then, there was still like that peace and that stillness of like, you're gonna understand, just hang on. And I feel like there was a purpose that he showed me of why he waited longer to respond to me and like the good things that he did in my heart. Even though that was really hard and dark and depressing, and I think back on that and I'm like, oh, that was horrible. I can see God's goodness to me. And the fact that every time I reached out for him, he reached back and he was already drawing me close to him again. What he really did through that season was convince me that he does want to be close to us and he wants us to know that he's close to us. He wants us to feel close to him. Now, he may give us seasons where we have to fight harder to feel that so that we're more intentional about that, so that we're more aware of it. But it isn't like it's an arbitrary couple of months where no matter what we do, we can't draw near to him. Like there's always something that we can do, and there is always a way to get our heart back to him no matter what, and he fully convinced me of that. I guess this is something Gabriel pointed out to me near the end of that season. We were reading the Bible together and it's like looking at all the prophets and you see the pattern of all of God's wrath that he was pouring out and like prophesying and all of the judgment that he was saying. In so many passages, it's very explicit that that was for the purpose of drawing them back to him. And so all of these seasons of hardness and harshness that they are experiencing from him, the point of that is to get their heart back to him. And as soon as they're responding right, God's gonna respond to them and bless them. It's not like he just punishes us arbitrarily. It's like as soon as we repent, we are forgiven. He was so ready for that from the beginning, and he was so ready to draw close to us again. It's not that he's angry sometimes and kind other times, and it's like you never really know what you're gonna get. I guess God's bipolar. He loves us and he wants us, and when we call out to him, he is going to respond. And sometimes it takes longer for various reasons of things that he wants to do in our hearts, but it's never that he's not listening or isn't going to care. And so that is something that I've held so deeply, and that has totally changed my life and totally changed my perspective, because now I'm not going through my life afraid of the times when I'm gonna feel far from God and there's nothing I can do about it, and it's just gonna be a dry season and there's gonna be no mercy and no kindness and no faithfulness and like no response from him. Like his mercy is new every day. Every day. That has convinced me to fight all the harder all of these times when I don't feel close to him, and sometimes it's the last thing in the world I want to do. It's like put in the effort to pray about it and like talk to God and try to figure out what's going in my heart and what's coming in between me and him. But he always shows me the way to be close to him again. And so all of the times that I'm not feeling close to him or just suffering through, like, I genuinely believe that's on me. I really want to caveat this, but I'm not sure how, because I don't want it to come across as like, if you don't feel close to God, it's all your fault and like you're not trying hard enough. But that's kind of true, not in like a condemning, angry, blaming sort of way that makes you just want to give up because it's too hard, but in a way of like empowerment. Like you have a choice to respond. Like you can take your heart and you can give it to God, and you can ask him what he wants of it and the way that he wants to heal it right then in that moment, and what it means for you right then in that moment to be close to him, because that's going to look different in different situations, in different contexts, in different days, in different hours of the same exact day. So I just wanted to speak that encouragement and that blessing, that I fully believe that God is a responsive God and he's so attuned to us. And there actually is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Like, there are a couple passages like that in scripture and I was always like, well, yeah, kind of, but kind of not. Or like Jesus saying, I will never leave you or forsake you. I'm like, yeah, but sometimes I feel pretty forsaken and I feel like you left me. Then I'm afraid that you actually do, because I'm kind of getting this impression that you're going to. But he showed me that I am completely safe with him, that I can trust him, that he loves me, and that literally there's nothing to be afraid of. And even now, in like the really hard things that I'm going through, and I'm feeling so overwhelmed by so much just wordless fear, and it's so confusing, but when I try to get a hold of my thoughts and I try to narrow it down, I'm like, what am I actually afraid of? I know that I'm okay if I have God. And now he has written it into my heart, seared it into my testimony, that I am never going to be left alone, that he's always with me, that there's nothing, no power of hell, no scheme of man could ever pluck me from his hand. That's what I'm really holding on to in other seasons of just really difficult things, that I'm actually okay as long as I have him. And I know, I feel it. It's not just like I'm like, okay, I know I'm okay if I have you, but it's like I feel it, like my body responds in peace when I remember that I am okay if I have him. And that's really all that I want. And so there's nothing that I have to be afraid of, because I know that he actually is never going to leave me or forsake me, because he's changed my life by convincing me how steadfast and pursuing his love is, and showing me that he wants me to respond to that. Like, he wants my heart, and he's not going to let anything or anyone else take it from him. Like, he is a jealous God. He won't relent until he has it all. Thank you for watching, and goodbye until more interesting things happen.